Welcome. Welcome to everyone here. This is a really wonderful occasion, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce the event. I feel like, the superstar is coming, and I'm just in the kind of, the preliminary. So my name, if you don't know who I am, is Anne Gerritsen, and I'm the Chair of Asian Art, supported by a very wide range of institutions, most of which is the KVVAK, who is co-hosting the event today. And I'm really thrilled that we are able to continue this collaboration, which is such a pleasure. But it really is a wonderful pleasure to be able to introduce today's speaker, who is the Hulsewé-Wasniewski visiting professor Susan Huang. It really is a joy to have her here. Thank you. So we are very lucky to have this collaboration with the Hulsewé-Wasniewski Foundation, which makes it possible to have visiting professors here twice a year, in fact, and not always, but very often we are able to combine with the KVVAK so that a much broader audience also gets to enjoy the expertise. So, a couple of words about Professor Huang. She's an associate professor at Rice University, which is in Houston, in case you're wondering. And she's really a world expert in Buddhist and Taoist visual culture. She published in 2012 her Harvard University Press book entitled Picturing the True Form, Taoist Visual Culture in Traditional China. She co-edited a book together with Patricia Ebry entitled Visual and Material Culture in Middle Period China. And beyond those books, she has published a very wide range of articles, chapters, and catalogues, and other pieces, far too many for me to list them here. But trust me, it's an extraordinarily impressive range of work, and I recommend it wholeheartedly to you, all of it. But it is her forthcoming book that we will be hearing about today. Professor Huang's new book is entitled The Dynamic Spread of Buddhist Print Culture, Mapping Buddhist Book Roads in China and its Neighbors. It explores the dynamic spread of Buddhist print culture, which is the topic of today's lecture too, in China, but really far beyond that, looking at major Buddhist printed images and texts produced between 850 and 1450. And I know how far she has traveled to find the materials that are included. And on the basis of more than 10 years of research and travel, she's been able to testify to this wide circulation of Buddhist print culture, which then allows her to demonstrate that the Silk Roads that we are all so familiar with really should be complemented by, if not replaced by, something that she refers to as the Buddhist book roads. She shows that Buddhist books are constantly on the move. Buddhist books are, and as she says, connected to other cultural products and transmitted along networks and book roads in a transnational and multicultural context. It really is innovative work, innovative research that connects art history, book history, print culture, as well as religious studies. It sheds a completely new light on Buddhist print culture and approaches it from visual, textual, social, and religious perspectives, looking both at the initial conception of the work, the construction and the materials, as well as the afterlife, the circulation globally of these materials. We have really felt very fortunate to have her in our midst for the last 4 days, and we feel somewhat of a sense of loss that this magical visiting professorship is coming to an end now. But we have this last treat in store, today's lecture, and you see the title on the screen, The Dynamic Spread of Buddhist Print Culture in China and Beyond. But for those of you who are lucky enough to live in Amsterdam or to come back to the KVVAK AGM tomorrow to hear about bronze from Tingling, please do also make sure to go and check the related material, that's just a little hint, related material, that's on display in the Asian Pavilion. So don't miss that. But now we turn over to Susan for our talk. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here. Today, I would like to share with you part of my new research that would be forthcoming by Brio in 2024, probably sometime in July. And so the topic I would like to share with you is the dynamic spread of Buddhist print culture in China and beyond. The book that I am publishing deal with the approximately the 600 years before the first Bible was printed by Gutenberg. So it's basically the framework is from 850 to 1450. The kind of printing that I'm going to discuss is the so-called woodblock printing. And here is one of the earliest examples survived today. It's in New York Public Library. Just a little bit general background of the woodblock printing, which is different from etching. So in a woodblock print, the ink lines and shapes are created from the uncarved part of a block's surface. In addition to these very early samples, probably dated to, as you can see on my line on top, from 10th to 11th century Northern Song. In Korea, also a very prominent culture in East Asia, there survived a really humongous set of Buddhist blocks now stored in the UNESCO temple called Han Sai. And so these are the blocks of the Korean Buddhist canon stored in Han Sai, and the blocks are dated to around 13th century. And of course, before the invention of woodblock printing, which is about 7th or 8th century, the Chinese already use seal carvings. And so this is a miniature precursor of woodblock printing. Here we are looking at some stamped examples on the left, discovered originally from Huang Library Cave and currently in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. And the wooden stamps that you see on the right is an extant example of 8th century Buddhist stamp discovered in Central Asia, in today's Xinjiang. So besides the samples of woodblock, I think that perhaps the most important information to take note about woodblock printing is that in British Library, there is the world's earliest dated printed book, which is the Buddhist book known as the Diamond Sutra. And it has a precise date, dated to 868. Let's take a look at this wonderful book. So at that time, the popular format of a Buddhist book looked like a horizontal scroll. And because the Chinese reads from the right to the left, the so-called frontispiece is decorated on the right of the book. And for the sake of time today, I will also only highlight certain key points. One is that we will take a look at this frontispiece, and then I would like to take you to the very end of this book, which has a really impressive donor's colophon, and we'll talk about what is the content of this colophon. But for now, let's take a look at the enlarged view on your upper right part. This so-called frontispiece shows a Buddha sitting in the palatial setting, preaching to his disciple, and he is also surrounded by some celestial pantheon. This overall composition more or less set the paradigm of Buddhist frontispiece design, in the following centuries. The the condition that you see here, the frontispiece, look quite new and quite well preserved. But are you curious that when this book was first discovered in the Huang Library cave at the turn of the 20th century and was brought back to UK, what was the condition? This was the condition of what it looked like in 1912. And I think that just 10 years ago, the British Library did an excellent job preserving and restoring the frontispiece. According to the scientists, they examined different parts of the paper throughout this book, and they concluded that the best quality paper was used to make this frontispiece. So now let's move on to the very end of this book and take a look. So these are some of the details that you can see from the micro lens about the quality of the paper. We know that the Chinese invented paper long time ago, 2nd century or even earlier. So by the time of 9th century, the technology of paper making was already very sophisticated. And moving on to the colophon, the so-called colophon is very important primary sources for scholars who are interested in the social history of Buddhism. And it's often the kind of commentary added by the sponsors or donors who contributed funds to print this particular Buddhist book. So here, I use the white color to highlight the colophon. I already translated roughly for you. So this colophon reads, on the 15th day of the 4th month of the 9th year of blah, blah, blah period, which equals to the year of 868, Wang Jie, which is a layman, had this made for wide distribution on behalf of his two parents. And scholars generally agree that this implied that his parents were already deceased. So here we touch upon a really unique feature for Buddhist printing, which is very different from the European print culture. And that is, marriages play a major role in motivating donors to sponsor printing, because marriage could be transferred to the family and whoever you would like to transfer. And the Buddhists think that by contributing funds and making copies of Buddhist books, he or she may accumulate merits. And then he or she could decide to transfer the merits to the family. So in this case, Wang Jie decided to transfer the merits to his deceased parents. There are also other examples that we see the donor transfer the marriage to her living daughter. This session that you are looking at is a cross section of the end of what I call the most popular book, circa the year of 1450. And that's around the time when Gutenberg printing was known in the European world. Here, let's just take a look at the colophon, which I translate the key point for you on the very left. This book called Fodingxing Dharani scripture was actually a Chinese creation. It was a creation made around 9th or 10th century, because we can find earlier example. But this is dated to mid-15th century, and it was probably made in today's Beijing. The person who sponsored 1,000 copies of this book was a woman called woman Sun. Sun is her last name. She was from Beijing. She sponsored 1,000 copies of the sutra on behalf of her daughter, who suffered from the chest pain while she was delivering a baby. So you can see all sorts of ordinary or mundane concerns, underlying the motivation of the sponsorship of Buddhist printing. So this is a very interesting example. And besides the colophon, you can see there are three symbols that I highlight in the middle of the slide. And these are the talismanic script that are supposed to be emulate powerful symbols that if the adepts copy it, they can, so the purpose, the power of this talisman is to safeguard a woman's childbirth difficulty. So this is very lively documentation of women's anxiety. So it turned out that women occupy the mainstream, sponsorship for this book around the 15th century. As I research on Buddhist print culture, I often started with case studies, but very soon I realized that I need to draw a map, because it seems that the book or the print that I study are not static objects. They were transferred, moved around, circulated in a very broad scope. And so this would be one of the 18 maps that I will publish in my forthcoming book. It was made by my wonderful architecture student, Rita Xiong, who worked for my project in the past few years. So you can see that what we mark on this map are various locations. They either designate the printing centers or archaeological sites where historical prints were discovered. You also see that there are these different lines, dotted lines, with some arrow. And these refer to imaginary routes of transfer. It's not, please do not read this as airplane map. It doesn't show you the exact route. But you can also see that I mark with different colors, which show you the different chronology. So if we slice all these routes chronologically, you will see the transformation like this. Starting from the 9th and 10th century, we have less documentation of material. You have just seen this print that you know by now is the world's earliest dated printed book. It was found in Huang, marked on the map, but most scholars think that it was probably made in Sichuan, Chengdu, and transferred there. So here we already see a small area network. As we move on, we can pin down more and more connections. Some even goes to Korea and Japan. And there are lots of archaeological sites discovered near Buddhist pagodas and temples. So in 11th and 12th century, we have more evidence to draw this network of connections in North China. Some even extend to today's Karakodo, which is Inner Mongolia. So, as we trace the network, when China was ruled by the Mongols, it seems that the network just go crazy. And, in today's presentation, I'm going to show you my reasons why I draw a dot connecting Hangzhou in the coastal area all the way to Herat in Afghanistan. I will also show you archaeological fragments discovered in northwest China, which is Eastern Central Asia, Turfan up there, and how the prints discovered there might have been made in Hangzhou. So let's move on to my evidence. Given that Hangzhou has been one of the most important Buddhist printing centers in history, I would like to use Hangzhou prints as examples for today's talk, and I will show you how the Buddhist books printed in Hangzhou actually travel eastward to Japan and also westward to Turkey Turfan, and maybe even all the way to West Asia in Afghanistan. So let's start with eastward bound. And I just went to the Asian gallery, before the talk. I noticed that Rijksmuseum also have a comparable shotoku. This is a really famous Japanese Buddhist iconography symbolizing Emperor Shotoku at the age of 2. And because he was a devout Buddhist patron, the Japanese Buddhists deify him and made his quote-unquote portrait as an infant form. So today I want to talk about the Buddhist book discovered inside one of the replicas of the copies of the sculptures like this. And I would also show you another Japanese sculpture now in Germany. And inside the statue, you also find lots of documents, including a beautifully printed Chinese Lotus Sutra. When I move westward, I will take you to Herat and show you a manuscript dated to 15th century. It doesn't look Buddhist, but its motifs, I hope that you will later be convinced, actually derived from the Buddhist print motif. Then there are some fragments that I try to stitch together, discover in Turfan, that I think that are also relevant to the Hangzhou Buddhist book. So now let's start with the Chinese Buddhist book printed in Hangzhou, but discovered inside 2 Japanese medieval statues. So the image that you see on the upper left is a Jizo, is a Buddhist Japanese Buddhist sculpture now in Germany. When the museum clean up the interior, finds. These are all the things that they discover, and I'm going to walk a little bit. So this is the Chinese book that discovered, and all the other documents were Japanese. You also see 2 miniature statues put inside. These may refer to Buddhist ceremony, segregation, to enliven the Buddhist statues. And this kind of activities often took place during Buddhist festival or some important event. So after the turn of the 20th century, more and more reports have been made to announce that inside Buddhist statues, we actually find a lot of documents. And then the example below is the Shotoku sculpture now at Harvard Art Museums. A few years ago, Harvard Art Museum curator curated a wonderful show putting together all the documents discovered inside this statue. So today our focus, we cannot look at all the documents discovered, but we will focus on 2 books discovered from these 2 statues. And very interestingly, both Chinese books discovered have illustrations accompanying the text. And also, both of these Chinese texts are the same Buddhist sutra, known as the Lotus Sutra. So let's take a look at this statue in Cologne. It's Japanese Buddhist statue Jizo, and it's dated to around 1249. So we can Right, so the statue itself is a Japanese statue, 13th century, but inside we have a 12th century Chinese book. And here I give you, additional image to show you how you open this statue. So in this case, you open from the neck, the head is movable. So now let's take a look at this book, and I want to show you a little bit the frontispiece. Here is the frontispiece of this book. You can see the Buddhist book start with the title called the Lotus Sutra, and it was printed in relatively smaller characters. It's very refined. The carving technique is very refined. And if you take a look at the content of this frontispiece, you realize that you have a Buddha as a central icon at the center. And more or less, this looks like a really impressive Buddhist pantheon. It is very different from the design of the other Lotus Sutra frontispiece that I'm going to show you next. So this book also shows some really valuable information of the publisher, and it's the white arrow that I pointed out and also enlarged on your left. It gives you a sense of who were the publisher. I translated the colophon for you, and it says that it was printed by the family of the official Jia's bookshop. It even gives you an address. So it's located to the south of so-and-so bridge. This is how the traditional Chinese shops, commercial entities indicate their address. It's not like our address, with a number, with a street name. It often uses the trademark of the city and tell you my shop is to the south or the north of certain things. And bridge is a very important trademark. Sometimes Buddhist temple, Buddhist pagoda is a good trademark. And so I made a map, and this would also be published in my book. We are looking at Hangzhou, which is the printing center of the 12th century. And I mark various printing shops, on this map. And you can see that this publisher, whose colophon appear at the end of this book, is D, is that publisher D. Located there. And near this publisher, you see a lot of orange dots. And these are also other publishers whose publications still survive today. So you get a sense that over there, I hope that you can see a bridge sign. I'm not that tall to point out the bridge, but you can see that the two line refer to the bridge, and near that bridge is a cluster of bookstores or publishers. And it makes sense because it's close to the National University. So the students, from the National University needs books. They need to study Confucian, classics, and so on and so forth. So they may come to this bookstore neighborhood to buy book. And Buddhist books, in order to survive commercially, the publishers also open a shop there. So that's a very vivid depiction of the city life, the intellectual life in space. Moving on to the second example, this time is from another Japanese statue now at Harvard Art Museum. You can see that the frontispiece that we see at the bottom, is composed quite differently. Right? Remember the previous one, you have a central Buddha at the center, but here you don't really see an obvious icon. Instead, the whole frontispiece is crowded with a lot of narrative details that seem to tell different stories. So the print, even though the print you are seeing now is discovered from the Harvard Art Museum statue, I want to make a note that this frontispiece and this book is now in DC in the Library of Congress. So the print and the statue are now collected in two different places. And at the end of the frontispiece, you can see that the cover signs his name here. And this is a really well-documented cover from Ningbo, from Siming. He has carved both Buddhist books and Confucian book. And so in some Confucian books, there are dates. So we can approximately date this book to around 1160 because that was the date where this cover was active in Hangzhou. And the other feature about the documentation of covers information is that even though these covers live in a certain place, they are all traveling workers and artisans. So even though in this colophon it says that this Chen Dao was from Siming, which is today's Ningbo, but his working area is actually Hangzhou. Okay, so just do a little bit visual analysis. I make a diagram, and this would also be published along with the image on top in my book. I give you a sense of what chapters or what episodes from the Lotus Sutra were these various narrative motifs cited from, and you can see 1, 2, 3, etc. were not laid out according to the order of the text. So that's another important, thing to note, and that is when we are thinking about the relationship between image and text in Buddhism, I think the older approach is to assume that the images follow the text very closely. But here you can see that this is not the case, that a frontispiece designer has its own logic of composing the images. And what is so interesting is that the illustrator used 2 pagoda as the kind of dividing force to divide what seems to be a horizontal composition into relatively, not equal, but it's 3 parts. Due to the limit of time, I can only choose 1 episode to share with you. So let's take a look at number 3. And this is actually one of the most popular and well-known parables in the Lotus Sutra. The reason why the Lotus Sutra was one of the most popular Buddhist sutras in East Asia was probably because its content is full of stories and metaphors and what we call parables. So the text use a lot of easy to understand stories to preach Buddhism. So let's take a look at the detail of this story. In English, we often refer to this parable as the parable of the burning house. It also has a Chinese title, meaning 3 carts getting out of the house. But the story, the protagonists of the story are the sons and 1 father. And the idea is to compare to the ignorant sentient beings as the sons, the children, and compare the father to the Buddha. So the story goes like this house was too old and it collapsed and caught on fire, and so the house was burning, but the ignorant sons, not knowing that it's dangerous, are still playing inside. So once again, this refers to the sentient beings being ignorant and not seeking Buddhism. The father, which symbolized the Buddha, in order to save the children, to entice the children, he told them that I prepare lots of toys, lots of treasures for you, and these toys are carried by animal carts. If you come out now, I'll award you with these animal cart loaded with toys. And so they listened, and they eventually came out. The print originally is, of course, monochrome. In order to highlight the motif I want to point out, I color it so that you can see the red part is the flame. It refers to the fire. So the house is on fire. There are two children in blue, so they are playing there. Then there are several cars the purple one is the ox car, the green one is the deer car, the yellow one is the goat. And why there is another cart carried by a bigger buffalo is a debate. So all of these numbers, the 3 cart versus another bigger car has some symbolic meaning in different sects in Buddhism. So we are not going there, but you get a sense of what a parable is like and how vivid it could be represented visually. Perhaps the most complicated designs of the Lotus Sutra illustration or frontispieces printed or published in Hangzhou is something like this. Here I show you 4 frontispieces from a set of Lotus Sutras that has 7 chapters. So each chapter has a frontispiece, and these are 4 frontispieces from 4 chapters. And if you read Chinese, the title of the chapter is illustrated on the upper right of the composition. Once again, if we take a look at the visual design and think about if there are something in common in these 4 frontispieces. If this is a class, I would ask you a question, but I guess I have limited time, so I have to just tell you the answer. You realize that the 4 designs follow certain visual grammar, namely the Buddha preaching on a kind of palatial terrace that is raised up and has the balustrade surrounding are put on the right side. There are also these really interesting placement of what look like architectural motif to the upper left corner. And if we look at zoom in our eyes to look at the design of the balustrade, something like this, each frontispiece is different. So it's, it looks like a pattern book. So where are these patterns from? My argument is that it was not a brand new idea design, invented by the illustrator of this frontispiece, because by that time, in China, there are already these standardized pattern books. The most famous one is this architectural manual, translated as building standard, and in Chinese is called 营造法式. So 营造法式 is an architecture manual compiled by the Northern Song government and circulated and printed around the 11th century. In this manual, you get a lot of different options of door patterns, tiles, and so on and so forth. And here I give you some comparison of the patterns, and you get a sense that the artisans working on Buddhist frontispiece at that time may have some stock motif, pattern books, and or something like that as visual references. All right. So regarding how illustrators design a seemingly busy composition like this, we also find out that printmakers or illustrator designing print, they look at existing paintings. So here is one of the most painterly motif. I like it so much that I choose it to be on the cover of my book. And we can take a closer look at it. It shows a painter at work, and it's a painter making a painting of what looks like a Buddha. And it's very interesting to observe the way that he made painting. He probably put this cloth, on a frame, and on top of of the frame, you see this zigzag line. It's probably referring to the string, the thread that tie the center of the painting to the outer frame. And near him, you have a side desk with this pseudo calligraphy miniature screen decorating on the table, and there are lots of bottles, maybe referring to the pigments and so on. And it's very interesting that this overall design was inspired by a painting like this, depicting a scholar's space. So this is a painting in and color on silk, a very refined painting in National Palace Museum in Taipei. And I hope that you have a chance to visit Taiwan and to go see this wonderful museum. What we see here is a scholar, reading, being served by his servant, and in his scholarly studio. And he is seated in a couch furniture and decorated with a screen, which has a painting within a painting. There are also side table, but in this case, there are books instead of the pigment bottle. Then there is a motif that appears to travel very far beyond the Lotus Sutra, and is this motif showing workers, constructing a building, and is located on the left corner of chapter 5. Frontispiece. And here I analyze, so we do need to follow my coloration to see that there are actually at least 4 workers and 2 work together. And I color the team, the people from the same team in the same color. So you can see worker number 1 is, passing a load of brick or something to worker number 2. And worker number 3 is about to throw a brick upward to worker number 4. And the worker number 4 is have this hand gesture that is ready to pick up the brick. It really is surprising to find out how this motif that was originally from the Lotus Sutra, talking about building a cell for monk could accumulate merits, travel eastward and westward beyond Buddhist context. So I'm going to show you one by one. The image on the right is actually a genre painting made in 18th century Korea. And the painting on the left is a manuscript produced in 15th century Herat. And it has nothing to do with Buddhism, but yet the 4 workers that we just look at more closely are still present there. Okay, can I go to the next slide? Right. So here we can compare this 12th century Chinese Buddhist book with the 18th century genre painting. You can see that Kim Hong-do, which is a really well-known and highly skillful Korean painter, he did not copy this motif, straightforwardly. He really, transform it very wisely. So first of all, you can see the team number 1 to 2 are still there, but they are pushed to the left, and also their position kind of cross over with the other team number 3 and 4. But he changed the figural motif of number 4. Take a look, number 4 here no longer pay attention to his teammate, and he was playing the brick up there. He created this genre painting based on something like the Lotus Sutra that has been transported to Korea since medieval time. And in Korea, we have a lot of Korean copies of Lotus Sutra, follow very closely the pictorial conventions originated in Hangzhou. All right, so moving westward, what about the relationship between the Lotus Sutra print and this 15th century Islamic painting produced in Herat? It is probably not that obvious, but you can see that Team 1 and 2 are still doing very similar, action, namely passing a load of something to the person on top. And number 3 is a very prominent pictorial motif. You can see that he still holds a brick and is turning a little bit backward, ready to throw it to his teammate. And his teammate, dressed in green, is also, stretching his hand, ready to receive. There are even continued story because Timuri Empire is, closely related to the later Mughal Empire. So the core artists actually preserve the pictorial prototype. So you can see that 15th century painting produced in Afghanistan was later copied and transformed in India in the 17th century Mughal court. And in fact, the painting on your left was made by a core painter in Mughal court, India. It's a woman, a female painter. All right, moving to Turfan, there's an even more surprising story to tell. So in Turfan, we found lots of small little fragments, printed fragments. Most of them are in Asia Art Museum in Berlin. The museum has not really stitched them together, but a lot of scholars who are curious about what they are try to do a little bit stitching. And this is what it come out. It looked like it's a fragmented, incomplete Buddhist frontispiece that shows some title here. There are some Buddhist figure in the middle, and then in the later, in the left part, you see a really big group of donors. Buddhist donors. And historians were really fascinated by these donors because each figure comes with the colophon that has their name. And the most important figure is this figure here because his name is Meng Su Su, and he was an elite Uyghur who worked for the Kublai Khan court, and so it's a Mongol court. The whole family were very elite, and they have a close relationship with the imperial court of the Mongol. And so even though they live in the Uyghur homeland near today's Turfan, but they all migrate to today's Beijing and to work for the Mongol court. So this part of images, I would say, is well studied, mostly by Chinese historians, and you have publications in English. These just to give you a sense of, how they are all well documented in official history of China, in Yuan official history. And Meng Su Su himself is a very, active diplomat and official. But his son was known as a really erudite Buddhist scholar, participating in translating, collecting Buddhist sutras for the Mongol court. So here we at least see 2 generations. It's very interesting. Pay a little attention to the men's outfit, the men's fashion of that time. You realize that they all wear these robe with really wide waist, with kind of multi-ring waist. And if we compare with the archaeological discovery of Mongol dress, this is the typical men's wear. You can see that they are very comparable. 54 pairs of coach silk cords are decorated the center. As for the women, most of the women that form this donor's family, they wear this really prominent hat that look like a tube. And actually, Marco Polo, who write about what he saw in Mongol China, he described this as if they look like chimney or something like that. So it also caught Europeans' eyes. So these are the so-called gugu hat, and it was only worn by aristocratic women in the Mongol society. The fact that you see the Uyghur men and women in this family dress like Mongol men and women itself is a very interesting phenomenon. In the Mongol society, it's voluntary to choose whether or not you want to dress like Mongols. And clearly, here they would like to support the Mongol government, and so they all dress like Mongols. Okay, I am more interested in the other part of these fragment groups that have not been well studied. So let's come back to this fragment. Only recently have I discovered another fragment in Russia. So this black and white fragment is from St. Petersburg, from the Oriental Manuscript Center. If you can see, let me just backward a little bit. On top of that, you see incomplete depiction of a tiger. And with this fragment, you can put it together, you see a tiger there. And in fact, it turned out that there's not only one tiger, but how many tigers did you see? There are at least 2 tigers. And the 2 tigers are actually hanging out in front of what looked like a city gate. And then you see some balustrade, some decoration of a terrace. Let me compare this with a cross section of a Hangzhou Lotus Sutra print. And this is from chapter 3. You can see that there are 2 tigers hanging out in front of a city gate. And if you compare with other motifs from that Turfan fragments, they are very comparable. So I identify different episodes from the Lotus Sutra. Today we don't have time to go into detail, so I would just ask you to take my word for it. But this session, this craft session that I compare, is part of the overall frontispiece from chapter 3. So with this comparison, it seems that it's plausible to assume that the fragments we found in Turfan might be produced in Hangzhou. And so I create an animation. How did Buddhist books from the south of China got to be transported all the way there? In order to answer this question, I look into the Mongol infrastructure, and it took me several years to work with my architecture student, and we built this really complex postal station map. If you visit my website, Shih-shan there's a category called map, and you can click it, it's interactive, and you can put in a place name, and you can find where it is. So you can see that this is a really complex infrastructure. And from Hangzhou to all the way to Turfan, no problem. You can change several routes. Sometimes you may take some water route, switch to the land route, and eventually you would be able to transport books there. All right, so my last session, I have probably 5 to 10 minutes to switch to Dutch art. And this is the first time I talk about Dutch art, so I would ask your tolerance. And I'm very excited to find out that Rijksmuseum have 4 prints that compare closely to Chinese Buddhist prints. And I would like to thank Dr. Jinling Wang, who is the curator of Chinese art here, who provide a study material for me and also for high-resolution images for my publication. And I highly encourage everyone to go to Asia Pavilion, maybe after this talk, to take a good look at these 4 prints. So these 4 prints are currently shown in the Asian Pavilion. They are they all have number on the print. Here you can see number 2, and it comes with the original print. And they are actually originally from the 17th century Dutch travel book compiled by Dapper, and it's dated to 1670. You know, they are easily available online, so you can take a look at the samples of all the illustrations. You know, the 4 one that I highlight there look so different from the rest of the print. So these prints were all made, you know, using copperplate etching. And in copperplate etching, the dark lines reflect the sunken parts of the metal plates. So the methodology is very different from woodblock printing. Even so, when the maker of these 4 specific prints, the makers want to mimic the Chinese woodblock print visual effect. So if we compare the 4 prints with the rest of the prints included in this Dutch travel book, and I give you one example, and I'm surprised to find out today that in our Asian Pavilion, something like this at the center is also on view. So you can compare the 4 prints with the print at the center. You can see that the visual effect is very different. You know, what you see at the center is more standard effect, highlighting the contrast of light and shadow, whereas the 4 prints inspired by Buddhist woodblock print look flatter, or it look more linear. However, if I zoom in the sections that I circle in red, you will see that it is still done by etching, because you can see there are cross etchings details there. So this is pretty amazing to me. When I first encountered this, I thought of the Chinese fascination of copperplate, and here I give you a counter example, and that is how Chinese woodblock print try to imitate copperplate. Here you are looking at Madonna and a child, and this is an illustration included in a 17th century Chinese printed book of an ink cake catalog made in China. You can see very close detail of cross etching. Those were actually made by woodblock print. I would like to thank Professor Lin Lijiang in Taiwan to share this high-resolution image with me. She is the expert of this topic. So coming back to the Rijksmuseum print, here we are looking at number 3 of the 4 print. You can see there is a bridge in the foreground, and in the lower left, you have a monk standing in front of what looked like the entrance to a very elaborate Buddhist temple over there. And on the other side, there is a cave-like structure, and inside you have more furniture, maybe another altar. And I found the exact composition in a set of Buddhist sutra that got printed very widely and circulated in various versions in the 17th century. So this example I show you is chapter 28 from Avatamsaka Sutra. So it's the so-called Huang Jing. This sutra has 80 chapters, and this set of sutra in each chapter has one different frontispiece. So altogether, there might originally be 80 frontispiece frontispieces, but it seems that the frontispieces did not survive completely. So I was able to only find one exact composition comparable to the Rijksmuseum etching. So what is even more interesting is that in this Chinese set that I offer as a comparison, there is a colophon at the very end that gives us a sense of where the book was printed, and it was in Suzhou, near the Northern Temple. And in the following few slides, I will show you the map of where this location is. But let's come back to the comparison. If we just juxtapose the etching below with the Chinese woodblock print above, you realize that the Dutch design is a reverse design of what we see in the Chinese original. So my next slide, I'm just going to flip the Dutch etching. So when you flip it, you can see that they are exactly the same composition. Not the, of course, they are, one is etching and the other is woodblock print. So that is a very interesting discovery, although it should not be a surprise, because the original location where the Chinese print was made is in Suzhou, near the Northern Temple. This is a map of Suzhou, a historical map that is now preserved in Japan. I thank Professor Huang at Princeton University who shared this image with me. So in the 17th century, there were fervent exchanges east and west. And so beyond Buddhist sutra or copying of Buddhist frontispiece, we see that in another Dutch travel book, not Dutch travel book, European travel book, dated to 1667 and compiled by a German Jesuit scholar, Kircher, you include a section of Chinese calligraphy in various fantastic style. And this was a citation directly quoted from the Chinese encyclopedia, very popular and widely reproduced in the 17th century and onward. This is an example that I prepared in my PowerPoint, but this week I was in Leiden University. I was delighted to see that in their library they have their own version collected. So this is from Leiden, and you can see if you compare just this section with this line, starting from this line, it's all the same. It's the same style of calligraphic script. My point of inserting these calligraphy comparison is just to make a point that at that time the Europeans were fascinated with Chinese knowledge, and they did a lot of 100% copy. All right, coming back just to show you my thought on other prints. Here, I know that we have a graduate student working on a master thesis melody somewhere, right, on, these 4 prints. So, what I will say, she may also observe it already. But these Chinese colophons, you can see that are European imitation of Chinese characters, because some are not complete, like this character is not complete, and like this colophon is reversed. So this is, so getting the point that they probably copy from Chinese prototype and do it reversely. Let's go back to the other 3 prints. You notice that the figure I color in yellow are on the left. But by now, if you are familiar with the stereotype design of Buddhist frontispiece, you know that the Buddha preaching tend to be on the right. So we can flip them and then compare to some of the designs of the Buddhist prints made in China. So here is a comparison, not identical design because they are probably from different chapters, but it gives you a very good sense of what the prototype the Europeans were used. So here you can see that this Buddha at the center is accompanied by a smaller bodhisattva, also seated on a lotus seat. And my interpretation of this is that something is missing here, because usually a Buddha is accompanied by two bodhisattvas, and so on top you do see two sitting beside. The other mistake, is a minor mistake, is that the Buddha has all this radiation coming out from the forehead. So you notice that in the original Chinese print, it should be coming from the forehead, but here is coming from the crown. So that's a minor mistake. And I can go on and on. This Chinese print that I compare is in Paris, and you can, if you compare with number 2 in the flipped version, you can see that the design, the furniture that I highlight are almost the same style. It's 3 legs, and then on top of it, you have an incense burner and another more elongated bottle. They are comparable, also in terms of the textile, the floor ground, and so on and so forth. And then also in Rijksmuseum, I think this is in the Dutch session, we have delftware, kind of inspired by Chinese blue and white. And I want to, I think that everybody, our experts here at Rijksmuseum already noticed the comparison, but I will just show you. You can go to Gallery 2.22 to take a good look by yourself, but basically you can compare motif by motif and realize how free, how creative artists East and West were, and they can freely use the visual materials that are available to them. So thank you so much for listening.
Well, I think you will agree. That was extraordinary and a really wonderful presentation. I'm sure there are questions. And are you willing to answer some questions?
Of course, I am very willing.
Okay, so I think we are ready to jump up and bring you the microphone. So if somebody would like to raise their hand, maybe we could adjust the lighting slightly so it's easier to look into the space. If somebody's awake in the back. Yeah, okay. A question here. Yeah.
I was delighted by your lecture, I must say. And I'm very interested in the way the book printing culture went to the West. And you discovered something in Herat. And do you know something about Samarkand and other cities of the Silk Route, and how it went beyond? We think the Western book print has been discovered by or invented by Gutenberg, but there are also voices who say initially it was in Italy. And that would be right. More to the roots of the trade.
Yeah, No, thank you for this question. There are scholars who trace the East and West and offer some speculations, but I would say that there's no firm evidence at all to talk about how the printing technology in the East was transferred to Europe. So I speak based on the evidence. So it is. So far, we have not found anything, but although I would say that the study of Silk Road is growing, and we have more and more new archaeological materials discovered in Central and West Asia, and also the other hope that we may have now is that more and more scholars go beyond area study. So when I was trained, I only look at Chinese art. We study East Asian languages. We read Japanese, but we don't read Persian. But now the younger generation who work on cross-cultural or global history, they have to study a lot of different languages. And I think there is a new book, very thick book, the history of Cambridge history of the Mongol Empire. It was a collective scholarship. It's amazing. And scholars consulted and compared Chinese versus Persian sources, and they found out, sometimes something that totally when undocumented in Chinese sources were very elaborated in Persian sources. So I'm hopeful that in the near future we would have a more complete picture of how cross cultures happen. But so far I don't have evidence. Thank you.
Dankjewel. Thank you very much for your presentation. If I may ask about your research methodology, because it's so much spread out, and just now you mentioned as well, you have Persian resources maybe. How do you deal with so many resources and so spread out, or do you go to every library or museum and...
No,
or
I
digital,
cannot.
digital resources, maybe?
Right. I think that the silver lining of this age of information is that a lot of primary sources have been digitized. So indeed, you get more access to a lot of different libraries. I teach at Rice University, which is a university focus more on undergraduate teaching. I did a lot of co-teaching with other professors. So I actually accidentally found out this manuscript, the illustration from my colleague who co-teaching Asian civilization with me. She's an Islamic expert. So I think that sometimes when we go beyond our comfort zone, we would have some surprise. And I often like to combine my teaching with my scholarship, my own research. So sometimes when I try new ideas, I would try to teach my student and to read some new materials together. But I still see myself as fundamentally someone who study Chinese art and visual culture. And I always have a starting point, but then I like to connect the dot. And I follow my materials to go wherever I need to research. So for example, if I found out there are Chinese materials in Japanese temple or statues or in any archaeological site, then I will trace it. So I guess we have to follow our primary sources. Yeah, and sometimes it would lead me to some unexpected zone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful talk. It really opened up a new world for me. I was wondering about the number of copies that would be printed from the blocks, and so the number of books, because that of course relates directly to the potential spread. The more copies, the wider the spread can be. So can you say something about the number of copies that would be printed?
Thank you so much for that question. That's a very important question. In fact, yesterday I gave a talk on the most popular book in, around 1450, and I talk about the number of copies a little bit. It seems that around 15th century, according to the donors' colophons, most people contribute 1,000 copies. So it seems that that is like if you want to pay for Buddhist printing, that seems to be a very standard number, although there were, extraordinary donors who would go beyond that. And in terms of the blocks, some print scholars have speculated how many times you can use the same block to print until the block is worn out. It's something like 20,000 times, but it really is subjective. It depends on the wood you select, right, and then the temperature under which the blocks were stored. So that part we have no idea. And the other very interesting thing to note about Buddhist print culture that is different from the European print culture is that I think that the European scholars of history of book or print culture are very preoccupied with how many copies a book were printed. And they use the number of copies as an indication of how wide knowledge was spread. In Buddhist case, a lot of materials I study were actually found hidden in Buddhist architecture or statue or pagoda. So they were actually not supposed to be seen. And so you realize that the Buddhists, even though they print 1,000 copies of certain things, maybe all these 1,000 copies went to a Buddhist pagoda, or some went to the pagoda and some for practical use. So that's the number, the relationship between the number and how and the implication of numbers. Even though you can print 1,000 copies of certain book, the print oftentimes were either stored in a temple or by a store. And so I say these are donors and not patrons. So I want to make a distinction between these two words. When we say donors, they basically just come to a shop, they pay, and they get some copies. They are not commission someone to make anything specifically for them. So the Buddhist prints that I study are more for the general public, that they may make one set of block, and they may be printed for many 1,000 copies for different donors. And the donor often like to announce their identity. And so the colophons become more and more detail-oriented. It's almost like a receipt that you pay and you want to be known, and you also want to be known what you pray for. And so you can carve a stamp and just stamp on the prepared colophon. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Thank you. Yes.
Oh, wait.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to ask you about you said the Dutch, the etchings that were from, and the pictures were flipped. Could it have anything to do with the fact that, because you mentioned that everything, like in Chinese culture, you read from right to left. So also maybe the importance, if you look at a picture, your eyes would start at the right-hand side, and in that way they transferred it the other way?
That's a great question. And actually, I want to give credit to one of my undergraduate students in Seattle. I once taught at University of Washington. And I work on this project for more than 10 years. So I try to bombard my students with all my research material. And one day, I told my student, I noticed that, oftentimes you have Buddha preaching, and the Buddha is not sitting frontally, but rather facing that side. Then this student has a brilliant idea ever since when I cited him. So he said, would that be because the text of a Buddhist frontispiece is it's always on the left of the image. It is true because, the Chinese write from the right to the left. Therefore, the frontispiece of a Chinese book often appear on the right side. This is different from the Uyghur book, for example. When the Uyghur copy a book made in Hangzhou, they switch the location of the Buddha and the frontispiece to that side, and they turn the Buddha from the right to the left. So this has something to do with the relationship between the image and the text. And because the frontispiece is often on the right of a text, so I think it makes sense to depict the Buddha turning to the left. Is this the question you are curious? But all right, you want to? Yeah, right. So, but coming back to the context of this 17th century Dutch book, and to think about where these four prints were inserted, they were kind of in their own right. They are between two pages with text, so they were not really treated as frontispiece. Yeah. So. That's something I want to know. Yes, question?
Yeah, and just to add to the question about the flipping, it's also to do just with the technology of creating it, right? If you make a copy, you create your plate, and then when you print it, it gets flipped. Right? So this is to do with copying something that is already in the printed form.
Right.
And it's very common in European copper plates too, that you see copies that are flipped. So that process is actually familiar, but it's interesting how you add to that too. So I'm going to jump in and ask take the position of chair to ask you a question, and it builds on your question earlier about methodology. And you were describing your methodology as a kind of hunter for texts, right? And you hear about some archaeological find or some statue that contains objects and texts, and you go there and you chase it down and you look at it in libraries. So it's the text network and the book road that you are looking for, which is interesting when you look more broadly at the ways in which people have studied networks and the Silk Road that you model the book roads on, which is also looking at patterns of trade and missionary activities. And I was reminded of the work of Ronit Ricci, who studied the spread of Muslim texts, and particularly from the literary culture as it spreads from India to Indonesia. And she follows, and for her the question is also textual, and looking at the ways in which texts spread from India into Indonesia as Islam spreads that way. But she's asking questions about whether they are missionaries in the first place or merchants, and she follows the religious networks first and then finds the texts afterwards.
I see.
Right? And you seem to do it the other way around. So do you do both? Yes.
Not really. I'm very interested in tracing people as well, but sometimes you don't have enough the evidence for people. The best example I have in my book about people as agency is my chapter on the Mongols. I talk about the elite Uyghurs in one chapter. There is an amazing Uyghur who worked for the Mongol court. His name is Yihei Mishi. He was considered as one of the pioneering navigator in the history of navigation. And he worked for the Kublai Khan since he was a teenager, and he ended up as like a millionaire, had a lot of money. And in 14th century, he donated a lot of money to 100 Buddhist temples. And it just happened that this stele survived. So that there is a stele in Fujian that documented 100 temples that he sponsored. And so I make a map of these 100 temples, and I try to study, to see them as more or less like a temple network. And it was fascinating because most of the ways that we know about you are the expert, about temple is to go to the gazetteers. But Chinese gazetteers survive in disproportion. You have a lot of temple records in the coastal area, but you have almost nothing in Northwest. But in this 100 temple goes sporadically, including Beijing and all the major cities in Jiangnan, but also have a lot of temples in Northwest. And so and these 100 temples, according to the stele, all have collections of the Buddhist canon. And this Uyghur pay money and funds to these temples as the temples to recite sutra on his behalf. And so, this is a way to accumulate his own merit, but he was too busy. He didn't have time to go to all these temples. So he would ask the temple to recite sutra for him. And in my book, I speculate how this could actually be done, because monks were very busy. They don't really have time to recite so many sutras for you. But in medieval China, a lot of major temples that collected Buddhist canon. And by the way, Buddhist canon often has at least 6,000 texts, so it's a humongous collection. Oftentimes, they build furniture. And that's one of the most fascinating Buddhist furniture called revolving bookcase. The idea is that you can recite Buddhist text symbolically. So by turning the wheel where it's loaded with all the book, it is as if you have read the book. And so here we have people's network versus, the Uyghurs network versus the temples network versus the books network. And this is a very good question that you raised, and I want not to be too simple-minded. And in my various presentations, I did tell my audience that even though I highlight the so-called Buddhist book roads, I am cautious about the overlapping situation of Buddhist book roads. So Buddhist book roads overlap with infrastructure, the map, the postal station. It overlap with temple networks. It certainly overlap with merchants networks. Right, and I think that as network study is getting more and more popular, I think the next step that we should do is that we should not be just preoccupied with our own networks, the network we are particularly interested. We need to combine different layers of networks to make sense of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody sure? Your last chance to ask questions? Okay, well, then I think we want to thank the audience and We will thank Susan in just a moment. I just want to tell you that tomorrow, for those of you who are members of the KVVAK, we have our AGM and a lecture by Dr. Wang Jingling about bronzes. No? An introduction for the upcoming exhibition, to which I'm sure everyone is very warmly invited. You can still join the association if you'd like to. Please speak to the secretary, and you will be very warmly welcome to join the ranks. But please join me in thanking
Thank you so
Professor
much.
Yes, I want to thank you
It's a
also
great crowd.
on behalf
Thank
of the KVVAK.
Oh,
I have a small present for you.
oh, thank you so
The
much.
Asian art collection of the
Oh,
Rijksmuseum.
thank you
I
so
hope
much.
you don't have it.
Oh, no, I don't.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
thank
okay.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, thank you so much.
So may I all thank you for your coming here and have a safe trip home.
Thank you so much.